Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of our series Kingdom Pace. All of us live at a certain pace and we got to set that right. In fact, Jesus, when we follow him, helps us set it really well. This week, we talk about how he invites us away from the scramble of pride and into the pace of humility. Check this out. My wife and I have 4 kids. We'll be going to 3 different schools, a high schooler, 2 middle schoolers, and an elementary student. And so carpools for days and like tracking all around with activities. So if you're parents, we feel you. I also had the privilege of being a high school teacher for a number of years. I got to do that for about 8 years back in the Midwest. Absolutely loved it, and it was challenging then without a global pandemic. And so I just want to personally honor all of you who are stepping into that, all of you who navigate all the challenges of school and all the difficulties that go with that. We really do have so much honor. We're cheering you on. We know it's going to be a great week. God has good things in mind, all right? Listen, we are launching into this fall, and before I get into today's message, I don't want anyone to miss out on what God seems to have ahead for our church. There have been times where people have shown up, and I love this. People will find their way to a church by way of a friend, by way of the internet, or any different ways, and slowly over time, what you start to see emerge is hopefully a clearer picture of Jesus. And God starts to do things in your life and surround you with people and do really awesome things. But once in a while, it's really important to back up and say, what is at the heart of all of this? Like if you boil it all down to the essentials of our faith, what is that really like? What this does in our lives is a couple of things. If you've been kind of orbiting Jesus or been around church or finding your way back, what it does is it gets right to the center of all of it. If you've been wondering what this is about, this fall is all about it. We're calling it good news because that is the gospel. That God has good in mind for us. There is good news for every single person. For those of us who are followers of Jesus, there is nothing like looking again and again and again at the core of our faith, and most importantly, finding ways to share that in the lives of others. So we're gonna lean into that this fall for our whole church. We're gonna do this in a couple of different ways. Obviously, on the weekends, we're going to do this. We're actually going to preach through the book of Romans one chapter at a time for about 8 weeks. And if you've ever, as a believer, like looked into what this letter to the Roman church did in the lives of people, you'll just hear stories for days of what God does when we look again at what he's accomplished in Jesus. It's going to be so good. But beyond that, we're also going to invite people to gather with people they're already connected with, friends, family, neighbors, life groups, people that they've been in different studies with, and discover again together what life with Jesus is really like. So listen, I don't know if you know anybody in your world that needs good news. Is there anyone that you know or you that needs some good news in your life? Anybody? Listen, we just need some can we just not have the bad news? Let's just the title be more than just the most inflammatory thing that could possibly be said in the moment. We need some people, and people around us need people to show up in their lives with things that are helpful and impactful, meaningful, good things in their lives that matter like today. This is the thing we believe God is inviting us into this fall. Now here's what I know. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have decided to follow him because of all the impact he's had in your life. Here's what I also know about you if you're a follower of Jesus, is that you have people around you that you interact with all the time. And if you care at all about them, you also care that they, if in any way possible, they could come to know Jesus. What happens to us, though, as followers of Jesus sometimes is that we know what God's done for us, we know what we wish God would do in their lives, but we don't know how to connect those two things. This fall is not only about leaning into the good news, but helping every single one of us in receivable, helpful, simple, replicatable ways, hand the good news of Jesus to other people, one piece at a time. In fact, the best way that we're gonna get started is at this little event we're calling a Rally Your People training. That these people around us, what we don't always know how to do is invite them close to God. What comes natural is to invite them to church. That's awesome. That's great. I believe singing out the truth of God together, looking into the truth of God together, these things matter. God works when we gather as the church. So important. So yes, if people are open to gathering as a church, invite them in. But more than that, there's no way to replace the trust and relationship you've already built with them. So if you show up in their world, they may not trust church, they may not be interested in something like this, but they do trust you. They are interested in you showing up. And if you showed up just a little bit more ready, available to be able to invite them in Jesus' direction, that's what this is about. So if you're a follower of Jesus, been trying to connect those two things, don't miss this. Take a picture of the QR, sign up today. In about 90 minutes, we're gonna hand you about 3 different tools to pull a small group, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people around you and discover together. Not you, the teacher, God, the teacher. The scripture pointing us in Jesus' direction. You will be equipped and ready to rally a few people around you and point them in Jesus' direction. If you're not a follower of Jesus or you're not sure about Jesus, you're like, I wouldn't call myself a Christian. Like, this church thing's okay, but I'm not really a Christian. Like, don't call me that, right? Definitely don't call me evangelical. Like, just don't call me anything. Just let me do my thing. This is also perfect for you. No experience required. What we're gonna do is hand you some simple ways to look into the scripture with some people. And then week after week, we're gonna offer you some ongoing support. It's not that we don't wanna figure out who Jesus is. It's not that we don't wanna invite other people toward Jesus. It's that we don't always know how. We're gonna get started at this kind of event. And so I wanna invite you to get everything possible about this fall that God has in mind for us. This is how we're running together. If you wanna run together, you wanna run with us, snap a picture, sign up, show up, and just invite a few people around you. You'll be surprised what emerges as God does this. Listen, fall is a time where a lot of us step back into some rhythms. And so the rhythm of being around and engaged in the local church and hearing what God has said on the weekend is so good, but also rallying and gathering with some other people. So lean in. Now, some of you have spent your week shopping and preparing, praying, surviving, just trying to get to that place where someone else is gonna take our kids for the day. It's gonna be great. Others have different reasons that fall steps into another kind of rhythm. Either way, when people invite you into things that are good for you, often the question is, man, I don't know how I'm gonna make that work. I would really love to, but I can't figure out how. I'm so busy, and busy is such a badge. And the deal is, all of that is a question of pace, which is really what we've been leaning into and what we'll lean into for the rest of our time today. What we've been saying is that there are all kinds of things that drive our pace of life. And behind how fast we're going, how tired we are, how stressed out we are, how anxious we might become at different times, behind that is something driving that pace. Whether we're running away from fears, toward ambitions, we've invited other kinds of kings into our lives that drive us. Whether it's a target bank account number, a certain position or achievement, a trajectory of our career, our relationships. These kind of things can drive us, and in and of themselves, they're not bad. They're not bad things. They're just lousy kings. They're tyrants that sit on thrones and drive our lives to the point of exhaustion. But what we've been saying is this, is that if you could put a good king on the throne who was like totally capable and loves us intensely and looks for our good, then on the heels of that would be a pace that was sustainable, a pace that was meaningful, a pace that was enjoyable. This is what Jesus invites us to. So over and over, we've been listening to Jesus and looking at what he has to say about what life is like when he's in charge. Yeah, it has implications for our job. Yes, we still have to manage money. Yes, relationships are still part of our lives. But Jesus brings a leadership, a calmness, a support, and a people around us in such a way that the pace of life is so much more meaningful, enjoyable, sustainable. This is what he invites us to. So here's what I want to invite you to do. There's going to be a picture here show up on the screen with like 3 different passages from the Bible. We're always looking into what God has said because what he says matters most. We're going to look today at this story that Jesus talks about with his kingdom. Now, the thing about following any king is you don't really know what it's like until you try it. But Jesus over and over still tried to describe, hey, if you let me lead, here's how you find your way into that, and here's what that's going to look like. So we're gonna look at 3 different passages today where one is a story that Jesus talks about, hey, this is how you find your way into my kingdom and all the good I have for you. We're gonna look at a description of the kinds of people who find their way toward Jesus. And then we're gonna look at a passage that actually David wrote in the Psalms, a poem that captures this like this interaction, this relationship, the dance that we do to live both in obedience and dependence, reliance on God. How do we keep a pace where Jesus is in charge? So if you don't have a Bible, it's no problem. Download this app right quick. Just go to the App Store, search Bible. This will be the first one that comes up. You can follow along super quick. Mark chapter 10, verse 13. I want to invite you to go there. This picture that Jesus paints, I think you'll find a high degree of familiarity. How many of you have ever in your life interacted with a toddler? Anyone? Anyone ever spent time around toddlers? Parents are like, yup, right now. Grandparents, you're like, it is so good when we get to hand them back full of sugar, right? Those of you who are siblings, you get it, right? Some of you are like elementary and you got those little ones who are like, oh my goodness, learn to tie your shoe for the love. Anyway, I want you to call to mind, you're gonna see some children show up in this story with Jesus, and I want you to picture toddlers, because this is essentially the sort of child that's described in this passage, okay? In Mark chapter 10, this is what happens. One day, some parents brought their children to Jesus so that he could touch them and bless them. Super common practice. If there was an important teacher, people were like, listen, speak some good over my kids, okay? Very common, and so this happened. But the disciples, now, disciple means learner, one who is taking on the way of life of someone else. And Jesus surrounded himself with some people who watched the way he lived and said, we want to live like that. Show us how to live like that. Not just agree with everything he thought, but do the things he did. So these are these followers, and somehow they missed part of the message, because what they do, it says, is they scolded the parents for bothering Jesus. When Jesus saw what happened, he was angry with his disciples. And he said to them, let the children come to me. Do not stop them. Listen, one of the best things you can do is read the life of Jesus and watch for his character. Jesus, over and over, this is just one of many examples where Jesus creates space for people you wouldn't think he'd create space for. Especially in the first century, children had way less value and way less prominence and priority in life than even they do right now. But even today, how often do we give them a table on the other side of the kitchen so the adults can have a conversation? Right? This is the kind of vibe, like, listen, don't bug him. He's got important things to do, and you all wait your turn, is what the followers, these disciples say. But Jesus says, no, I got space. I have space. In fact, y'all have something to learn from these kids. This is what he says. He says, the kingdom of God belongs to those who are like these children. Now, these guys would have been like, that's crazy talk. He goes on and he makes it even stronger. He says, I tell you the truth. Anyone who doesn't receive the kingdom of God like a child will never enter it. This is some strong words. It says, it goes on, and he took the children in his arms, which is how we know something about their age. He brought them in, took them in their arms and placed his hands on their heads, and he blessed them. In fact, the word there, it says he intensely blessed them. He spoke so much good over them, declared good over them, willed good for them. This is what blessing means, to will and bring good into the life of another. This is what Jesus did for these kids. And he said, look, y'all are about to miss it. Don't miss this, don't miss this. If you want to find your way into my kingdom, you got to become like these kids. And they're like, that is backwards. Right? If you imagine this picture, most of you said you've interacted with a toddler on some way, shape, or form. You know, like, what? What in the world are you talking about? The disciples are ready to rush right past this because your pace of life often leads us to miss what God is showing us, what he has for us, good he has in mind for us. But Jesus was not in a hurry, and so he paints this awesome picture. And he invites them, he uses this chance to kind of invite and instruct them a little bit. In fact, it's a great description of this invitation Jesus would make to all of his followers. We've been using this from Matthew chapter 5. At the beginning of Matthew chapter 5, Jesus describes the sort of people who will find their way into the pace of life and the kingdom that he has in mind. One of the things that he says along the way is in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5 says this, you're blessed. You'll receive all the good God has for you. You will find your way into this kingdom kind of life with a sustainable, enjoyable, important, impactful pace. When? You're content with just who you are. No more, no less. Think about a kid, like a toddler. How often do you see these toddlers being super self-conscious? Like, I don't know about the toddlers that you've interacted with, But one of my toddlers went to preschool with like crazy hair, a zip tie over a t-shirt every day for like 6 months. No pretense, no pride, just like, this is who I am. I'm showing up. I'm Zeke. This is how I write my name. I got stories to tell. I got personality to bring. I'm excited. I'm just gonna do the thing. Right? There's a contentment, an acknowledgement of who they are, right when they are, right where they are. I'm good. Like if you imagine this story with Jesus, these kids are not worried about what the disciples think. They're not worried about what's next on Jesus' calendar. They know two things. Mom and dad said, go. This guy seems to have space. Here I go. There's a simplicity to that, an honesty to that Jesus says, look, if you don't find your way in like this, if you don't approach in this kind of way, you're bringing too much baggage. You're gonna have stuff in the way. You're not gonna receive this. They were unfazed by the opinions and judgments of others. They were unconcerned about other people's priorities. There's lots of things they didn't know. All they knew was mom and dad said go, or mom, whoever says go, and Jesus said, okay. And they showed up not expecting bad, but expecting good. Jesus is saying, hey everybody, you want a better pace of life? You want the good I have in mind for you? Look at these kids. Like this, do it like this. This is how you do it. Receive what I have for you just like this. You know who he never tells a story like this about? You should read the life of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Just watch the character of Jesus. This is the best way to, you can watch Christians and that can help a little bit, but we're all jacked up. Can I get like a head nod? All of us, right? Right? Listen, watching a Christian to know what Jesus is like watching a toddler to see how dinner tables work. You know what I'm saying? There's a way in which we're all growing up and progressing, but it's not gonna be the standard. Jesus is the standard. If you watch him, he never says, hey, you know who you should enter the kingdom of God like? An expert. You know, hey, you see this person who has it all together, has all the riches, all the polish, all the prestige, all the power. That's how you get into my kingdom. He never says anything like that. Who does he say it about? Toddlers. Listen, as much as this world invites us to be people of power, of prestige, of influence, of acquisition, of achievement, those things in and of themselves are not bad, but they are not the way that we receive the good that God has for us. The world and our pride will tell us, if I can just demonstrate my strength, if I can develop my strength, if I can find a way to win, if I can even compete and press down others to lift myself up, if I can appease the people who are in power to find my way forward, this is how I'm gonna find my way into the good of life. And Jesus says, no, it's not it. I have good in mind for you. Receive it like this. In fact, he says it even more clearly in Matthew chapter 5:5. Maybe this will make a little more sense to you. This is the translation we normally read. In Matthew 5:5, it says this: God's blessing is not for the prideful. God's blessing is not for the achieved. God's blessing is not for those who have acquired and attained all that they ever had dreamed of. God's blessing is for those who are what? Humble. As one of my kids was growing up, they were kind of growing out of toddler, right? And so they went to church one day and they found a lesson, or they heard a lesson about humility. And so we said, hey, what'd you learn about in church today? And he said, listen, I learned about humility. Oh, that's so cool, man. What's humility? And he thought for a second. He goes, you know, it's like when I'm awesome. Or like I do something really, really awesome. I just don't tell anybody about it. You know, we think that's who. Listen, little kids say what we were thinking, they just say it way more directly. That's not what humility is, and that's not who God blesses. God blesses those who are humble, right? We know there's something inherently wrong with that definition. As much as it was a step in the right direction, there was a few steps yet to take. If we really want to see what a picture of humility is, flip back to this story that we've been telling. Why is it so much easier for toddlers to be humble than it is for us? To know just who they are, nothing more, to pretend and try to achieve, but also nothing less, not a diminishing of self, but a confident, comfortable, peaceful acknowledgement of who they are. Why is this so easy for them? I mean, they're nearly always, if you think about a toddler and what their mentality is, they are nearly always in a position of learning and receiving, aren't they? Right? Even when they're talking about the things that they know, it's something that they're learned and they're stoked about it, right? They're constantly experiencing and exploring. The idea of like posturing or pretending to be something else, to a toddler, that's only for fun and laughter, not to try to protect themselves from what other people might think of them. There's a comfort in just who they are, right? Why is that? Why are they able to live so honestly? Why was this the perfect picture Jesus is painting? This picture of honesty, of self-acknowledgement. A huge piece of it is because in a healthy home, a toddler is protected and loved and provided for. So they don't stress and worry about those things. Day to day, minute to minute, they receive the care and have their needs met. They're protected. They don't worry about not being safe. They don't worry about losing the love of those people around them or being led by them into harm, right? Because good parents, those who love and care for these toddlers, they create this kind of space. Life that has this kind of space for peace and laughter, for rest and for exciting adventures. A life with this guarantee that even when they fall down and scrape their knee, right, that there is a hug and a Band-Aid with just the right cartoon character waiting for them. They trust this, they know this. That there's a listening ear always available, a reassuring voice when fear does try to raise up and scrape its way into our lives. That what they find out is that the moment they have need, there was someone watching the whole time, even when they forgot someone was watching and being attentive. That the one who loves and cares for is never far away, always ready, willing, working, planning good ahead. Their next meal that they haven't even thought of was in a loving parent's mind weeks, days, hours before they even knew they were going to be hungry, right? It's the kind of place where kids are comfortable being totally dependent because they're so loved and provided for. And so they can just receive this leading, this instruction, the development that this kind of parent would provide for them, even the correction along the way. Are you catching yet that I'm not just talking about toddlers? Listen. Jesus says it's like this. You can be like that because I'm like this. Provision, protection, a desire for good, plans for good, provision for good, strength for good, all the way along. And so we can approach like a child because he's got things handled. And the moment we stop believing that, there's the moment we start to grasp and claw and climb and work and worry and posture and filter and sort and edit and do all the kinds of things that pride leads us to do, thinking either that we can do it or that for some reason we even have to do it. But Jesus says, no, like a toddler. I got this. I got you. Be at peace, be at rest, enjoy, find your way forward, lean on me. You see, humility in a lot of ways is easier for kids because they know their place from 1,000 different cues, don't they? Think about it. Think about the last toddler you interacted with. How do they know they can be at peace? You know how? Because the loving touch they receive from the one caring for them comes from a hand much bigger than theirs. Because the one who cares for them has muscles to pick them up the moment they have fallen. That the one caring for them has arms to reach shelves beyond their reach, right? That the one who they come to with questions is able to name and describe and instruct and teach them about things they didn't even know were necessary. That when a parent or a loved one disappears for a few minutes, they're gonna come back with just the right thing to meet the need. and that they're way better at stuff. This toddler doesn't need to know everything. They don't need to unlock the mysteries that is tying a shoe, because there's one who knows how to do this. You're catching it again, right? Jesus says you can receive the kingdom like this because he is like that he provides that kind of place. You see, humility, this invitation to find our way into the good that God has for us. Humility is not about just not telling people how awesome we are. Humility is not self-deprecation or diminishing ourselves, right? The lure of pride to make ourselves more than we actually know we are in our most honest moments will wreck our lives and make us go fast, and we end up exhausted, dying in a pile. But Jesus says, no, I'll bless you when you're humble. I have good in mind for you if you can just receive it. Can you just receive it? Trust me, I got you. Now, humility is not some next level spiritual achievement. Jon Tyson says it this way: humility is not a virtue received for the spiritually elite. It is only the appropriate response. Humility is the appropriate response to seeing who Jesus is and who we are. Now listen, I don't know what happens in you when like a teacher would ask a question in a class. If you're one of those that's like immediately head down, please don't call on me. Or if you're like Hermione Granger and your hand shoots up right away. But listen, I'm gonna ask you a question and all of you know the answer. You all ready? Here it is. You can say it out loud when you know it. When your parents were teaching you how to safely cross the street, every single one of them said one thing. They all said it, maybe in a different language, maybe in a different way, but they all said one thing. What is so important if you're about to cross the street? What do you have to do? Look both ways. You gotta look both ways. Here's how you find your way into humility. Y'all ready? You have to look both ways. If you look just one or the other, you will miss it. All right? What happens is a lot of times people will say we need to just look at ourselves. If we just look at ourselves, just look inside and find the beauty, just acknowledge the good parts and amplify those and don't get caught up in the negatives. The problem is when we look just at ourselves, if we actually look honestly, there's like some jacked up stuff in each one of us, isn't there? Every single one of us knows this. We'll talk about this in the vein of good news. We all, no matter how hard we try and strive and climb and claw, we don't become exactly the father we long to be, the friend we long to be, the neighbor we long to be, the coworker we long to be. We just, no matter how we try, we jack it up. And so if you're gonna really live with who you are, you gotta do something in the midst of all of that brokenness. Not diminishing all the good, but looking at just ourselves isn't gonna work. We got to do what? What did mom and dad say if you're going to cross the street? Look both ways. And this is what Jon Tyson is saying. And the order matters. Look first at Jesus and look long at Jesus. Because you're going to see a couple things. Like a toddler looking at a loving parent, you're going to see hands much bigger, strength much higher, knowledge far beyond. And beyond all that, you're going to see one who loves, who protects, who cares, who has good in mind and wants to bring good to you. We look long and first at who Jesus is, because what happens then is we can look at ourselves differently. So listen, if you want to live humbly, if you actually want to find your way into the good God has for you, living humbly requires that we look closely and regularly at who Jesus is. Right? Have you ever been in a store where a toddler loses their parent for just a moment? Freak out moment, you know what I'm saying? Once they stop being oblivious and playing with whatever they were playing with. Right, all you have to do to make a toddler freak out is make them think that suddenly their parents have left and they're not coming back. Listen, followers of Jesus, this is what happens to us when we take our eyes off Jesus. When we don't look regularly, a toddler is constantly reassured with that presence over and over and over. I'm here, I'm for you, I love you, I got you, I'm here, I love you, I'm for you, I got you, I'm capable, I have good in mind, look at this good thing I have for you. Oh my gosh, that's so hard, I will sit with you in your hurt and your pain, we'll make it better, we'll find our way through. This is what a parent does over and over and over and over and over. For those of us who are followers of Jesus, we have to create space to receive all of those from Jesus. Look over and over and over because this is who he is. This is what he's like. And this is what happens when we do that. Y'all ready? Then what we can do is look the other way, right? You gotta look both ways. We look long and hard at Jesus, but living humbly requires that we look regularly at who we are, right? Who we are, because if he really loves us, he's really for us, then all of those deficiencies and brokenness, he's gonna help us with. He's not gonna condemn us. A loving parent, a child who falls on the ground and scrapes their knee, right? And you would think that their life is ending in that moment, and there's barely like a red spot, but they're freaking out. They're totally panicking, right? And so does a loving parent show up and be like, get your act together. You kidding me? No. Jesus doesn't show up like that. He says, let's go. I got you. This morning when one of my kids threw a foam hamburger at the wall and pulled the clock off the wall and it rolls, it doesn't break. Oh, it didn't break. And then it rolls and stops. Psh, glass everywhere. I'm late. No, we go through that together, right? When we look long at Jesus and who he is, when we remember and rest in that, then we don't freak out. We can bring all of our brokenness, all of our mistakes, all of our hangups, all the things that we're battling, and know with confidence that he'll walk us through that. He can bring good into that. We also know that he can lovingly reassure and empower and employ all the good that's in us for the good of others. And so we don't have to look at the brokenness of our lives with defensiveness or blaming. We don't have to point fingers at someone else. We don't have to hide in shame as if we're the only one who's messed up. Get real. You'll never meet someone who's not, right? We don't have to power up and make others feel smaller so that we feel bigger, because listen, we have this loving Father who has so much good in mind for us. When we look long at him, we can look honestly at us. Are you picking this up yet? And it slows our pace. We don't have to look at all of our brokenness and say, I gotta go faster, I gotta try harder, I gotta work harder, I gotta be righter, I gotta be better, I gotta, and we run ourselves into the ground. Humility invites us to a better, more sustainable pace. In fact, the order of all this matters. I'll go super fast through this part because I got words today, but I gotta get going. When Jesus starts the Beatitudes, he says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him. When we look at ourselves honestly, we recognize we need more than what we brought. And then it says, God blesses those who mourn. Because if you look honestly at the effects of our brokenness on our own lives, or if you look honestly at the brokenness, the effects of our brokenness on the lives of those that we love, that brings grief and sadness. Because we don't like it. I don't like when my leadership failures negatively affect other people's lives. I don't like it when my impatience makes my kid question their place in my family or my love and care for them. I don't like when my hurried pace moves me right past my wife or puts me right into fix-it mode instead of relationship, I'm with you, let's stay together mode, right? The brokenness of our lives, we should grieve that, but the good news is God blesses those who mourn. Those who would boldly look at themselves and grieve over the hurt in their lives, whether someone else brought it or it came from us, it says they will be comforted. Jesus meets us in all of that and brings comfort. And so he blesses those who are humble, those who will look honestly at who they are. God blesses those who are humble. This is the gospel, that in all of our brokenness, there is forgiveness and there is help. There is strength from hands bigger, from arms longer, from storehouses deeper. There is a loving presence that has good in mind for us. God has blessing and good in mind for every single one of us. But here's the thing. If you run at a pace marked by pride, achievement, self-actualization, self-focus, self-prioritization, you will miss it. And Jesus says, no, be like these kids. Step in to the space I've created for you. I have good in mind for you. I want to finish this way. This line that Jesus quotes is actually from hundreds of years before. A man named David said this was true, that God has good in mind for those who receive humbly from God, those who are of a lowly position, not those who climb the ladder and look down on everyone from the top, but those who recognize they're actually at the bottom. In Psalm 37:11, it says almost the exact same thing. And in Psalm 37, you will find some really great habits to live humbly. He says, here's how you know. If you're living like this, you're living humbly. He says, trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. Hold here. Trust in the Lord and do good. Listen, can you picture a toddler? Toddler's not freaking out if mom and dad have left them or have bad in mind for them. Just trust. Listen, live in peace, and trust. What the world will tell you is trust in your strengths, do your best, and hope it works out. And that will run you into exhaustion and unsustainable pace. But Jesus says, no, trust me. I have good in mind. You'll live safely in the land, and you'll prosper in every way that I want you to. He goes on, he says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires. That when we delight in the Lord, not delight in our accomplishment, not delight in the number of likes, not delight in the way people respond to us when we show up and tell them what we do or who we are or the things that we're wearing or the way that we look. No. Take delight in him. Take delight in him like a toddler just soaking up the presence of a parent who's ready to play with them. He says, I'll give you the desires of your heart. He says, commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him. He will help you because he's good. He has good in mind. He says he will make your innocence radiate like the dawn. You don't need to defend yourself, justify yourself, protect yourself, argue with everyone who disagrees with you. God can take care of all of that. He's got you, right? Toddlers aren't sitting around trying to explain to everybody why they believe what they believe or doing what they're doing. They're living. You make your innocence radiate like the dawn, the justice of your cause shine like the noonday sun. He says, be still in the presence of the Lord. The world will say, if you rest, you're getting behind. God says, no. Be still. Rest. Enjoy. Wait patiently for him to act. Hey, good news, everybody. It's not all on you. It's not. He will act. Be patient. Trust him. Do good. Don't worry about evil people, he says. Don't worry about them. They're going to do their thing. Everybody's got their own pace, but just watch it. It'll end. Don't worry about evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes. Don't look across and see how green the grass is. Just enjoy what God has put in front of you. Stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Everybody's tired and cranky, ready to erupt on anybody at any given moment. After the year and a half we've had, oh my goodness. Don't lose your temper. You don't have to try to strive and control, grasp and claw. It only leads to harm. For the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord will possess the land. Soon, the wicked will disappear. And though you look for them, they'll be gone. But here's what he says, the lowly will possess the land and live in what? If you want a kingdom pace, revisit Psalm 37 and just underline. Trust, do, dwell, rest, wait, delight. And if you need a picture for that, imagine a toddler in a loving and healthy home. Jesus says, like this. Do it like this. Live like this. There's a different pace because we follow a different king, capable of things far beyond us. And so he invites us to look and live honestly with ourselves and others. We can be content with just who we are because we know just who he is. This is the kind of life he invites us to. It's a very different kind of pace. And it's only because Jesus made a way for us. The gospel the good news that all of our brokenness has no power to separate us from God because Jesus paid for all of it. And if we'll just say, Jesus, I trust you, I want to follow you, there's nothing that can separate you from the good God has in mind for you. Toddlers, no one can take you from your Father when you trust the way he made. And that way is Jesus. The moment we say, I trust you, we live in the presence of a loving, strong, good, kind, present, capable Father. And so like children, we can live with peace, rest, joy, pace. So this week, let's look closely at who Jesus is and see ourselves in light of him, remembering that he has good in mind for us. And if we'll see our place clearly with him and rest in that, trust in him to do what only he can do, we find a kingdom pace. Well, this week, if there's any way we can support you, I want to encourage you to reach out. You can also get everything you possibly can about this series by texting DIVE IN to 94000. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if this has been helpful and pass it on to a few friends along the way. We'll see you soon.